Carl Jung, the profound explorer of the human psyche, unveiled a truth far more impactful than just the nature of empathy itself. His most groundbreaking discovery illuminated why empaths, these deeply sensitive souls, can vanish from relationships without a single word of warning, never to return. This sudden, silent departure, often perceived as an enigma or even cruelty, is in fact a powerful revelation about the hidden psychological mechanisms that most of humanity has yet to truly grasp. Through his meticulous research into psychological types, Jung documented what we now understand as the empathic departure syndrome. This syndrome describes a profound pattern. Individuals blessed with extraordinary sensitivity and a dominant introverted intuition often find themselves trapped in the intricate webs of toxic relationships. They might endure for months, even years, extending an almost infinite wellspring of patience, understanding, and accommodation. Yet when their limits are silently breached beyond repair, they simply vanish, completely, inexplicably, and irrevocably. Jung didn't label this phenomenon dangerous because of the act itself, but because it exposed the existence of potent, unconscious boundary systems within empaths, operating far beneath the surface of conscious awareness. It revealed a deeply embedded primal defense mechanism, a quiet sentinel guarding the very soul. Their introverted intuition, a highly sophisticated internal radar, would detect the subtle currents of relationship toxicity and emotional manipulation long before their conscious mind could even begin to process it. This creates what Jung termed a silent psychological emergency, an invisible pressure cooker building within until a sudden, decisive departure becomes not just an option, but an absolute psychological imperative. What made this discovery so profoundly disturbing to Jung was its absolute finality. These were not temporary withdrawals, dramatic exits designed to garner attention, or fleeting acts of anger. These empaths would vanish into a complete, impenetrable silence, never to reconnect, leaving behind bewildered partners, friends, and family members who genuinely believed that everything was perfectly fine. Today, we will uncover Jung's illuminating insights into why empaths leave without warning and never return. We will explore why he believed this wasn't an act of cruelty or abandonment, but rather what we call unconscious self-rescue. The psyche's ultimate emergency intervention when conscious boundaries have been utterly compromised and failed. Jung's breakthrough came through observing a patient he described as possessing an extraordinary, almost porous sensitivity to the emotional states of others. This individual would absorb criticism, manipulation, and relentless emotional demands for months on end, while their dreams, the language of the unconscious, began to paint increasingly desperate warning signs. Vivid nightmares of drowning in muddy waters, being trapped in burning buildings, or carrying impossibly heavy stones became a nightly symphony of distress. Then, something unprecedented occurred. Without any apparent external trigger, no argument, no dramatic confrontation, no final straw, the patient simply vanished from a long-term relationship. Complete silence, no explanation, no gradual withdrawal. Jung was initially baffled. This contradicted everything he understood about human behavior patterns. When he investigated further, Jung discovered that the patient's unconscious mind had been meticulously tracking the relationship's toxicity through their introverted intuition for a full 6 months before the departure. Their nervous system had been registering the subtle tremors of emotional abuse and imbalance, even as their conscious mind rationalized it away, minimizing the harm or dismissing their own internal alarms. The sudden disappearance, Jung concluded, was far from impulsive. It was what he powerfully termed psychic emergency surgery. Jung wrote, "The unconscious intervened when consciousness failed to protect the individual from psychological annihilation. This profound case revealed that some individuals possess internal warning systems so exquisitely sophisticated that they can predict relationship failure months, even years in advance. Yet their conscious mind often remains paralyzed, unable to act, until the unconscious is forced to seize complete control. This was not an isolated incident. Jung began documenting strikingly similar patterns across multiple patients, leading to his foundational theory of what we call empathic overwhelm, a challenging condition where profound sensitivity, without the safeguard of proper psychological boundaries, can, ironically, become a liability. Jung discovered that highly sensitive individuals possess what we term intuitive toxicity detection. Their dominant introverted intuition function acts like a finely tuned psychological scanner, continuously scanning relationships for emotional inconsistencies, subtle manipulation tactics, and critical psychological red flags. This operates far below conscious awareness, often sending signals that are dismissed or overlooked. Here's what Jung found. These individuals unconsciously process thousands of micro-signals, subtle tone changes, fleeting facial expressions, shifts in energy, and behavioral inconsistencies. Their conscious mind, however, often dismisses these crucial insights as mere paranoia or overthinking. Their powerful intuitive function diligently creates detailed psychological maps of relationship dynamics, while their deeply compassionate feeling function simultaneously compels them to ignore these vital insights, prioritizing the perceived needs of others over their own well-being. Jung meticulously documented 3 distinct phases of this unconscious warning system, a journey from subtle unease to ultimate liberation. Phase 1. Silent alarm. The intuitive function begins to detect manipulation or emotional abuse, a quiet whisper in the soul. But the conscious mind, caught in patterns of accommodation, rationalizes it away, minimizes its significance, or blames itself. Dreams, however, become increasingly chaotic, urgent, and symbolic of entrapment or danger, serving as the unconscious's desperate cry for attention. Phase 2. Psychological pressure. The unconscious begins to build what Jung called departure energy, a compulsive, almost gravitational need to escape that grows stronger with each passing day. This internal pressure intensifies dramatically, while the conscious mind, still striving for harmony, maintains its accommodating patterns, creating an unbearable internal conflict. It's like a deep-sea diver's emergency ascent, the pressure mounting, demanding a break for the surface. Phase 3. Emergency override. The unconscious mind, sensing imminent psychological collapse, activates what Jung termed survival protocols. It seizes control, forcing a sudden, non-negotiable departure to prevent complete psychological annihilation. This is the soul's ultimate cry for freedom, an act of profound self-preservation. Jung realized that this intricate system profoundly explained why these departures appeared so sudden, so baffling to others. The empath's conscious behavior often remained outwardly accommodating, supportive, and even more giving, right up until the very moment of departure, effectively masking months, even years, of escalating unconscious distress. Jung identified a cruel psychological trap that makes departure without warning almost inevitable for many empaths. When their intuition detects relationship toxicity, instead of acting on this vital information, they unconsciously increase their accommodating behavior. Jung called this the inverse boundary response. The more threatened they feel unconsciously, the more giving, patient, and understanding they become consciously. This creates what Jung observed as a false relationship security, a dangerous illusion where toxic behavior is not only tolerated but inadvertently encouraged to escalate, because the empath's increased accommodation signals what appears to be infinite tolerance. The devastating result? Others genuinely believe everything is perfect, perhaps even better than ever, while the empath's psychological foundation crumbles invisibly beneath them. Jung documented heartbreaking cases where people were completely shocked by departures, precisely because the empath had been more attentive, more giving, more outwardly loving than ever in the weeks and months leading up to their sudden disappearance. Jung identified the truly cruel irony. Their boundless compassion became their prison. Their profound empathy, intended for connection and healing, inadvertently enabled the very behavior that ultimately destroyed the relationship. The more they tried to heal or fix others through relentless accommodation, the more silent permission they gave for toxic behavior to continue unchecked. This pattern explains why explanations are often impossible after departure. How do you articulate months, even years, of invisible psychological damage, subtle energetic drains and silent suffering to someone who never saw it happening, who was actively benefiting from your emotional labor? Jung noted that attempts to explain often led to further gaslighting, manipulation, or blame, making silence not an act of malice, but the only viable protective option for self-preservation. Jung meticulously categorized 4 distinct ways empaths vanish, each representing different levels of psychological awareness and distress. 1. The phantom vanish. This is a complete, abrupt disappearance without any visible warning signs to others. These empaths have mastered unconscious accommodation so thoroughly that their profound distress remains entirely hidden, even from themselves, until the very last moment. They simply stop responding to all communication permanently. Jung observed this in individuals whose feeling function completely suppressed their intuitive warnings until unconscious intervention became an absolute, life-saving necessity. 2. The gradual fade. These empaths begin showing subtle, almost imperceptible signs of withdrawal, shorter conversations, delayed responses, less emotional availability, a subtle energetic receding. Crucially, they never explain why. They slowly, gently reduce contact until communication stops entirely. Jung noted this pattern in those whose unconscious was gradually, yet powerfully, overriding their conscious drive to accommodate. 3. The boundary explosion. A sudden, dramatic shift occurs from endless patience and flexibility to rigid, unyielding boundaries. This is often triggered by one seemingly minor incident, a final pebble that represents months or even years of accumulated violations and unheeded warnings. They may not leave immediately, but they become completely unavailable emotionally. When these newly established boundaries are inevitably tested or violated, which they often are by toxic dynamics, permanent departure follows swiftly and without discussion. 4. The silent protection. These empaths recognize the pattern consciously and leave strategically, often choosing times when their absence will cause minimal disruption to their own lives, though perhaps not to others. They may leave a brief note or message explaining a general need for space or personal growth, but provide no specific details that could be used for further manipulation, blame, or emotional negotiation. Jung found that all 4 patterns shared one crucial, unifying element: the complete absence of negotiation or explanation post-departure. Unlike normal relationship conflicts, these endings offered no opportunity for discussion, reconciliation, or a second chance. The door, once closed, was sealed. Jung's most startling discovery was not just that empaths leave, but why they never return. It's not a conscious choice driven by spite or unforgiveness, but a profound psychological impossibility. Once the unconscious mind executes what Jung called protective departure, attempting to return creates what he observed as severe psychological distress. Jung documented that empaths who tried to re-engage or return to these relationships experienced debilitating panic attacks, profound depression, and what we call psychic recoil. Their entire nervous system actively rejected re-engagement with the perceived threat. Their unconscious mind had classified the relationship as psychologically lethal and would not, under any circumstances, permit re-exposure. Jung identified 3 formidable barriers to return, each a testament to the psyche's powerful drive for self-preservation. 1. Unconscious protection protocols. The very same psychological mechanism that forced the initial departure actively and fiercely prevents any return. Jung observed this as an evolutionary survival mechanism. Once the psyche identifies a threat of this magnitude to psychological survival, it establishes and maintains permanent vigilance, an impenetrable shield against re-exposure. 2. Transformation. During the period of absence, Jung found that empaths often undergo rapid, profound psychological changes. Their unconscious mind, finally given the space and safety, uses this time to restore depleted emotional resources, heal unseen wounds, and develop far stronger boundary recognition and enforcement. Returning would require abandoning this vital psychological growth, stepping back into a former self that no longer exists. 3. And reality recognition. Away from the suffocating fog of the toxic relationship, empaths often experience what Jung called clarity restoration. They begin to see manipulation patterns, gaslighting, and emotional exploitation that were utterly invisible or rationalized away while they were actively accommodating. This new, piercing awareness makes the very idea of returning feel like a conscious act of self-harm, a betrayal of their newly found truth and strength. Jung concluded that these departures represent what he profoundly called psychological molting. The individual must shed their old identity as the unlimited accommodator, the boundless giver, to survive psychologically. Returning would be akin to a snake trying to climb back into its discarded skin, a skin that no longer fits, a painful, impossible regression. Recognizing the immense suffering this pattern caused, Jung developed specific empowering techniques to help empaths recognize these unconscious warnings before reaching critical, crisis-driven departure points. He aimed to transform unconscious reaction into conscious choice. 1. Intuitive signal recognition. Jung taught empaths to meticulously track the correlations between their dreams, their physical sensations, such as a knot in the stomach or persistent fatigue, and the dynamics within their relationships. When anxiety, exhaustion, or chaotic dreams consistently increased around specific people or situations, this was a clear indication of unconscious toxicity detection. Instead of dismissing these crucial signals as just stress, Jung encouraged documenting these patterns to develop conscious awareness of these vital, unconscious warnings. 2. Boundary testing protocols. Rather than waiting for an explosive crisis, Jung advocated for deliberate, small-scale boundary experiments. Empaths were encouraged to express one small, clear limit, perhaps saying no to a minor request or asking for a specific need to be met, and then meticulously observe the response. Healthy, respectful people honor boundaries. Toxic, exploitative people violate them, test them, or react with anger. This provides an early, objective relationship assessment without requiring major confrontation or emotional investment. 3. Energy tracking systems. Jung instructed empaths to diligently monitor their energy levels before and after interactions with specific individuals. Consistent energy drain or a feeling of depletion from certain relationships indicates psychological toxicity, even when the conscious interaction feels superficially positive or engaging. This creates an objective, undeniable measurement of relationship health. 4. Communication frameworks. Jung developed simple yet powerful scripts for expressing limits without extensive justification or apology. Phrases like, "I've noticed I need more space," or "I'm not available for that right now," replaced detailed explanations that often invite manipulation and debate. The key insight: boundaries are statements of intention and self-respect, not requests for permission or negotiation. 5. Departure decision criteria. Jung established clear, actionable indicators for when departure becomes not just an option, but a necessary act of self-preservation. These included repeated boundary violations after clear communication, escalating manipulation when limits are expressed, refusal to acknowledge the impact of harmful behavior, and insidious attempts to use the empath's compassion against them. These techniques empower empaths to transform an unconscious, traumatic departure into a conscious, deliberate choice, eliminating the deep trauma of sudden vanishing while maintaining profound psychological protection. Jung analyzed historical figures who demonstrated both the struggles of empathic overwhelm and the triumphs of successful boundary integration, offering timeless lessons. Virginia Woolf. Jung would have recognized Woolf's profound sensitivity and her struggles with what he called empathic overwhelm. Her poignant letters and diaries reveal consistent patterns of absorbing others' emotional states while tragically losing connection to her own intrinsic needs. Her ultimate tragic departure from life itself represents the extreme, devastating end of what can happen when exquisitely sensitive individuals cannot develop and maintain protective boundaries. Maya Angelou. Angelou's powerful autobiographies reveal multiple instances of decisive, often sudden, departure from toxic relationships and oppressive situations. Jung would have identified her famous quote, "When someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time," as integrated intuitive wisdom, a powerful testament to trusting initial unconscious impressions rather than waiting for exhaustive, conscious proof or further pain. Carl Rogers. Despite his groundbreaking therapeutic empathy, Rogers maintained strict professional and personal boundaries. Jung observed that Rogers instinctively understood that true empathy, to be sustainable and effective, required protection. Unlimited, unchecked emotional availability ultimately destroys both the helper and the helped. His enduring success came from conscious boundary management, born from wisdom rather than unconscious accommodation. Eleanor Roosevelt. Roosevelt's extraordinary transformation from an accommodating political wife to an independent, globally influential leader demonstrates successful, empathic integration. She learned to channel her profound sensitivity towards social justice and humanitarian causes rather than allowing it to be consumed by personal accommodation. She found powerful, constructive outlets for her empathy that did not require self-destruction. The profound pattern Jung identified was clear. Successful empaths learn to trust their intuitive warnings and act on them consciously, with courage and wisdom. Those who remained trapped in accommodation patterns either departed unconsciously, often traumatically, or suffered profound psychological breakdown. Jung recognized that empaths need relationships with people who understand sensitivity not as a weakness or a liability, but as a profound strength and a gift. He identified crucial recognition signals for safe people. They respect a no without requiring extensive justification or explanation. They manage their own emotions and take responsibility for their well-being rather than expecting others to do it for them. They genuinely appreciate empathy without exploiting it or seeing it as an invitation for endless giving. They demonstrate what Jung called reciprocal consideration, actively thinking about how their behavior affects others, fostering a true give and take. The mutual empathy principle was paramount for Jung. He observed that healthy relationships for empaths absolutely require both people to actively consider each other's emotional well-being. One-sided emotional labor inevitably leads to the insidious accommodation patterns and eventual heartbreaking departure. Jung also recommended proactive community-building strategies for empaths, seeking environments where sensitivity is not just tolerated, but truly valued and celebrated. This includes creative communities where emotional intelligence serves artistic expression, therapeutic or helping professions where empathy has clear boundaries and a noble purpose, spiritual communities focused on consciousness development rather than emotional dependency, and what Jung called growth partnerships, relationships where both individuals commit to honest communication, mutual respect, and shared personal evolution. This is essential for avoiding empathic predators. Jung issued a stark warning about individuals who specifically target empaths, those who quickly share dramatic personal stories to trigger rescue responses. People who consistently violate small boundaries while apologizing profusely, making the empath feel guilty for setting them. Individuals who alternate between excessive appreciation and subtle, undermining criticism. And crucially, those who react with anger, blame, or manipulation when clear boundaries are finally expressed. These are critical red flags for the empath to heed. Jung emphasized that empaths must learn to see accommodation addiction as clearly as any other dependency. It often subtly serves the ego's deep-seated need to feel needed, to be indispensable, while paradoxically destroying the very possibility of authentic connection and true intimacy. Jung documented that empaths who successfully integrate their sensitivity without losing its essence follow predictable, transformative development stages. Stage 1. Recognition crisis. This stage is usually triggered by a particularly painful relationship loss or a moment of profound exhaustion, where they realize that their relentless accommodation didn't prevent abandonment or mistreatment, but actually enabled and perpetuated it. The breakthrough comes when they truly understand that their sensitivity is not a flaw, but a valuable asset that intrinsically deserves protection. Stage 2. Boundary experimentation. This involves the courageous, often terrifying, process of learning to set small limits and observe the responses. This stage is often fraught with considerable guilt, the ingrained fear of being selfish or uncaring, but it also brings the liberating, empowering discovery that healthy people genuinely respect boundaries, while toxic individuals tragically reveal their true character through their immediate violations. Stage 3. Intuitive integration. This is the profound process of developing unwavering trust in their unconscious warning signals rather than dismissing them as overthinking or paranoia. This includes learning to distinguish between generalized anxiety, which can be managed, and genuine, specific intuitive warnings about people or situations, which demand attention. Stage 4. Conscious choice. Reaching this stage signifies the ability to choose emotional investments wisely with intentionality and discernment, rather than giving indiscriminately out of compulsion. They become what Jung called consciously empathic, sensitive by choice and wisdom, rather than by unconscious compulsion or emotional reflex. Stage 5. Empathic mastery. This is the final radiant integration where sensitivity transforms from a potential wound that attracts predators into a powerful gift, selectively and wisely shared. They can love deeply, connect profoundly, while maintaining clear, unshakable boundaries, creating the extraordinary mutually respectful relationships they always desired. Jung noted that fully integrated empaths rarely need to leave relationships suddenly because they address issues early, communicate clearly, and only invest their precious energy in people who consistently demonstrate mutual respect and care. If you've learned to trust your inner warnings before reaching your breaking point, comment, "I honor the whispers, so I don't have to hear the screams." Jung also identified specific traps that can prevent successful empathic development, holding sensitive souls back from their full potential. The overcorrection trap. This is the pendulum swinging dramatically from overaccommodation to complete emotional unavailability or isolation. Jung observed this prevents the very genuine, deep connections empaths actually need for their psychological health and thriving. The guilt manipulation spiral. When empaths begin setting boundaries, toxic individuals often escalate their manipulation tactics, using the empath's ingrained compassion and guilt against them. Jung emphasized that how someone responds to your boundaries reveals their true character. This is vital information, not something for you to fix or feel bad about. The explanation addiction. The belief that boundaries require extensive justification, detailed explanations, or other people's agreement to be valid. Jung noted that over-explaining simply invites manipulation, debate, and further boundary breaches. Boundaries are personal decisions of self-respect, not group negotiations. The isolation overreaction. Withdrawing from all connection and human interaction rather than learning the crucial discernment between healthy and unhealthy people. Jung warned this prevents the meaningful, nourishing relationships empaths need for psychological thriving and fulfilling lives. Jung's maintenance practices for integrated empaths included regular solitude for deep emotional processing and recalibration, creative expression for channeling their rich sensitivity and inner world, fostering relationships with other emotionally mature, respectful individuals, and what we call boundary practice, consistently maintaining small limits to build confidence and strength for larger, more significant ones. Jung profoundly believed that empaths who learn conscious boundaries serve a crucial evolutionary function in human psychological development. When sensitive people demonstrate through their actions that deep, authentic connection requires mutual respect and reciprocal care, rather than one-sided sacrifice, they model healthier, more conscious relationship dynamics for everyone around them. Jung observed that unconscious empathic departure, while a necessary act for individual survival and healing, also serves what he called a collective teaching function. It often forces those left behind to confront their own emotional dependency, their exploitative or parasitic relationship patterns, and the void created by the absence of unconditional giving. Jung noted, the empath's sudden absence becomes a mirror reflecting back the other person's capacity for genuine care versus mere consumption of empathic resources. This profound teaching function operates through what Jung identified as absence education. People often learn about healthy relationship dynamics, the true value of empathy, and the importance of reciprocity through the powerful, undeniable experience of loss, rather than through verbal explanation. When someone who provided endless emotional support, unconditional listening, and constant emotional labor suddenly disappears, it reveals the stark, one-sided nature of the relationship in ways that words never, ever could. Jung documented that empathic departures often trigger what he called relationship awakening in those left behind, Some individuals faced with the void genuinely recognize their exploitative patterns and begin the challenging but vital journey of developing genuine empathy and reciprocity. Others, however, tragically reveal their true nature by becoming angry at losing their empathic resource rather than showing any genuine concern for the departed person's well-being. Jung saw integrated empaths as relationship pioneers, individuals who, by living authentically, demonstrate that true intimacy comes from conscious choice, mutual respect, and reciprocal giving, rather than unconscious compulsion or obligation. He believed that as empaths learn healthy boundary management, they create what he called empathy exemplars, living examples of how profound sensitivity and unshakable strength can beautifully coexist. These individuals show others that empathy doesn't require self-destruction, that caring deeply doesn't mean endless, limitless accommodation, and that healthy, nourishing love always includes self-protection as a cornerstone. Jung observed that when empaths courageously maintain their boundaries while remaining warm, open, and caring, they give others unspoken permission to do the same, setting a new standard for connection. Jung noted that empathic modeling has a particularly profound impact on children and young adults who are actively developing their own relationship patterns. When they observe empaths setting healthy boundaries while maintaining loving, respectful connections, they learn a vital lesson that sensitivity and self-respect are compatible, powerful partners rather than contradictory forces. This fosters collective emotional intelligence development. Jung believed that humanity's emotional evolution depends partly on individuals who can feel deeply, understand profoundly, while simultaneously thinking clearly and strategically about relationship dynamics. He saw empaths as what we call emotional intelligence pioneers, people who develop a sophisticated understanding of psychological patterns and, through their own lived experience, teach others by powerful example. Jung observed that empaths who have successfully integrated their sensitivity often become natural counselors, mediators, or healers, not because they sacrifice themselves endlessly for others, but precisely because they understand both profound emotional depth and essential psychological protection. Their unique combination of deep empathy and unwavering boundaries makes them uniquely qualified to help others navigate complex relationship challenges. He noted that integrated empaths often find their true life purpose involves helping others escape toxic relationships or develop their own emotional intelligence. Their personal journey from unconscious accommodation to conscious boundaries becomes a luminous roadmap for others walking similar, challenging paths. This also leads to social system transformation. Jung recognized that profound cultural change often begins with courageous individuals who refuse to participate in dysfunctional patterns. When empaths stop enabling toxic behavior through endless accommodation, they force social systems, be it families, workplaces, or communities, to either evolve and adapt or to reveal their true exploitative nature. Jung documented how empathic boundary setting creates what he called authenticity pressure in social groups. When the most accommodating member begins setting limits, others are compelled to either develop genuine empathy and reciprocity or to find new sources of emotional exploitation. This pressure often leads to healthier group dynamics, or it starkly reveals which relationships were based on exploitation rather than mutual care. Jung observed that workplaces, families, and communities with integrated empaths often develop higher standards for emotional intelligence and mutual respect. The empath's refusal to tolerate poor treatment raises the bar for everyone's behavior. From an evolutionary perspective, Jung concluded that the empath's journey from unconscious accommodation to conscious boundaries represents humanity's evolution toward more emotionally intelligent, respectful, and sustainable relationships. He saw this transformation as absolutely essential for creating cultures based on mutual respect, genuine connection, and the valuing of sensitivity rather than the exploitation of it. Jung believed that as more empaths learn healthy boundary management, they create what he called empathy tipping points, profound cultural shifts where emotional intelligence becomes not just acknowledged, but deeply valued and protected rather than exploited. He envisioned societies where sensitivity is recognized as a form of psychological sophistication, a powerful asset rather than a vulnerability to be preyed upon. He saw integrated empaths as vital bridges between humanity's current emotional immaturity and its profound potential for conscious, respectful, and deeply connected relationships. Their courageous journey demonstrates that evolution from unconscious accommodation to conscious choice is possible for everyone, inspiring countless others to develop their own emotional intelligence and boundary skills. The empath who leaves without warning and never returns isn't cruel. They are simply following a powerful, unconscious survival mechanism when their conscious boundaries have completely failed. Jung's groundbreaking research reveals this pattern not as a personal failure, but as a necessary psychological emergency intervention. But there is another path, a path of empowerment and liberation. When you learn to recognize your unconscious warning signals and trust them implicitly, when you develop the unwavering courage to set conscious boundaries before reaching crisis points, you transform yourself. You evolve from an unconscious victim of your own boundless empathy into a conscious creator of healthy, nourishing, and respectful relationships. Your profound sensitivity isn't your curse. It is, in fact, your greatest superpower. But like any powerful ability, it requires wisdom, discernment, and conscious application. Jung showed that the very same psychological makeup that makes you vulnerable to exploitation also makes you capable of extraordinary love, profound connection, and unparalleled insight. When properly protected and consciously wielded, the choice, dear soul, is yours. Will you remain trapped in cycles of accommodation followed by sudden, painful departure? Or will you develop the conscious boundaries that allow your magnificent empathy to truly flourish in relationships built on mutual respect, authentic connection, and reciprocal care? If you've ever left without warning and never returned, comment, "I choose conscious boundaries." Your journey from unconscious escape to conscious choice isn't just personal healing, it's pioneering a healthier, more authentic way of loving for everyone. Thank you for embarking on this journey of self-discovery.